I have beautiful children and a beautiful wife. I want them to walk free in their own land.
I am Reverend Al Sharpton, and I am inspired by Nelson Mandela because he personifies someone that nonviolently changed the course of world history with the democratization of South Africa. Everything humanly possible you could do to someone other than kill them, they did. Yet, he maintained his dignity and his determination. It is almost unthinkable what he endured, and then forgave them for what they did. That is why Nelson Mandela reached a level and a class all to himself. He taught us that you really have to keep your eye on the prize, and that nothing you suffer is more important than the goal you're trying to achieve. Nelson Mandela forever changed the world because he showed us that you can change the course of human history without lowering yourself to human depravity.
Welcome to the Gilchrist Experience. Today's guest, Dr. T. Pronounce your last name.
MAZIBUKO.
MAZIBUKO.
I always say to my patients, it sounds like merci beaucoup in French.
MAZIBUKO.
Yes, if you can say merci beaucoup, you can say MAZIBUKO.
I love it, just calling you Dr. T.
I know you do.
But you're formal. You've got quite a story here to tell. Of course, you being from South Africa and Nelson Mandela being all of our idols as far as fighting for democracy and going through the real struggle of, what, 27 years in prison, and the liberation of our people. I mean, this is where it all starts. And we saw Reverend Sharpton there.
Right.
Which he was in after Mandela got out of prison.
It's a very deep, painful,
Yeah.
long history, like his books say. A long walk to freedom. He did not travel this path alone. He traveled, I'll take you back a little bit to our history of Rivonia trial. Rivonia trial is what led to our honorable comrade. We call him comrade because we're in the same party.
Right.
Nelson Mandela, comrade meaning a friend.
Right.
Rivonia trial was the trial that sentenced 10 of our political leaders under the leadership of the African National Congress, which is the ANC. The Rivonia trial made us lose 10 of our leaders, leaving us stripped apart. At that time, I was very young, 1975 I was born, so I wasn't even born then. But when I was born on apartheid. I was given birth to a land of no freedom. I was been back to a land that had locked up our innocent people, killed innocent children who said in 1976, all I want to do is study in English, don't make me study in Afrikaans. And they were shot to death. That's June 1976. When we talk about the Youth Month.
76.
Yes. When we talk about the Youth Month of South Africa, which is, we celebrate it every month in June. June 16 is a very important day. We have a lot of important dates. We're looking back into 1956 where women walked against the pass because you had to go get a pass. And it was called a dom pass. It means you were dom to have the pass. So you could not go to town without the pass. So 1956, women of South Africa are powerful. We call ourselves, and the nation calls us Imbogodo, which means the rock. We are the rock of the nation. So as you can see, Winnie Mandela played a major role in the freedom of our liberation and in our freedom of our country. Hence, I'm saying Nelson Mandela was not alone, yet he was the symbol of our freedom. Because in every organization, there's a leader. There is someone who paves the way. And he was a lawyer, and he was an amazing speaker, and he never took, He took the bull by its horn, basically.
Now, he went to prison in the early 60s.
Yes.
What year was
Yes.
that? 60, what? 61? You remember?
I don't remember the exact year. I should
Oh,
know
I
when he
see.
went to prison,
I
but he
remember
was
when he got out, I was watching his release. I was at work in my
Right.
office. It was a Saturday morning.
right.
And myself and another brother, we had all the guys in the office shut up, get out the office, because we were watching Madiba
Right,
being released. So
right.
that was 1987,
Yeah,
Nine.
9.
89?
Yes. The negotiation started in 98.
So he went in 62.
62.
62, 70, no,
64.
Don't worry.
he was in
I
27
remember.
years, right? Mm-hmm. So he went in 50, wait a minute.
Let me get the Rivonia child. I
60s,
remember. We'll get it. We'll get it.
It was early 60s.
It was 80s, early 60s.
But the struggle here sort of
yeah, 80, 61.
stimulated the revolution over there. While we were fighting to sit in the front of the bus in the early 60s,
Right.
I mean, Nelson Mandela was going to prison for 27 years.
My visits in the U.S., I've been coming to the U.S. in and out of the country quite often, but this time is the first time I've stayed for longer. And coming here at the time of the elections, my heart sank. I felt like a black child may not taste the real freedom, because we're fighting the same fights back in South Africa. We cannot discredit what our leaders have done, but we're not there yet. Even the leaders say that too.
Right.
Because you cannot oppress people for all these years, and then when you release them, they say, okay, let's share power, but you're starting over here, and we're starting here. Right. We can never have equal rights. It's difficult to attain that. So when I come here and I see the struggle, and I read the history of the Black African American in the U.S., I'm realizing we are all in the same boat.
Oh, yeah.
So the only solution is that we have to unite, not within the U.S. or not only within Africa, but Africa, the U.S., everywhere there's a black child. We have to come back and unite to be able to conquer the challenges that we're facing. I will just talk briefly about me. When I wanted to specialize in radiation oncology, I was called a monkey, yet I was a doctor. I had qualified in medical school wanting to specialize in radiation oncology. My professor, who was a white old man, could not accept a black woman joining his department. This is in the era of Nelson Mandela having been released from prison.
Okay.
Yes.
So I'm trying to say we cannot relax and say, okay, we've won the war because now 10 of our leaders, Oliver Tambo is out of prison, Ahmad Kathrada was out, Nelson Mandela is out. We cannot. We have to keep on keeping up on the race, fighting, but the fight is different. It has to be education. It has to be access of land. It has to be access of the economical status. Teach our children about the economics. Let them get the opportunities. I would say our country has really tried its best to, now when I'm looking back and I'm looking at the US and I'm looking at South Africa and I'm looking at means that we've tried, like Truth and Reconciliation, where an oppressor came, was called by Bishop Desmond Tutu. I can never forget to mention that name. An honorable bishop who's done an amazing job. He called the country and the African National Congress and the National Party, which was the opposition party, came together. You'll remember that the Freedom President, the president who worked with Nelson Mandela on releasing Nelson Mandela, was President F.W. de Klerk, who also became a Nobel Prize winner because he allowed the freedom to take place. So he was honored. So that president and Nelson Mandela sat down and said, President F.W. de Klerk, we want you to come to our villages and identify the areas with the people who were involved where you buried our people. Because a lot of political leaders had died and nobody knew. People had no human rights. They would be killed and buried under the sea sand, or they'll be killed and buried under a certain tree, but nobody will know where they buried. So our oppressor and our freedom fighters had to sit down and say, let's find a way of working together. And that way was truth and reconciliation. I alluded to that during the NAN meeting, that it is very important that we go back into the history and identify the pitfalls and lay the emblems of where our people died. We cannot ignore that. In our culture, we believe in ancestorship. It means my forefathers, when they die, we bring them back to the house, we use the leaf, and we carry them, a certain typical type of a leaf. We bend the incense, and when we say, we welcome you. This is done by those who don't belong in Christianity. I was brought up in Christianity, so my belief is in God. So I don't believe in ancestral, but it's part of my country that ancestors are important. So hence, that's why truth and reconciliation was very important for South Africa. Because if without truth and reconciliation, it means we have no ancestors. And if we have no ancestors, it means we kill our own culture. So this was very important for the healing process and the unity to be formed. But after even those means that we've tried, still we have challenges, like when I'm facing that professor who tells me I am a monkey. Does not even say.
And what year was this?
This was in
the 90s?
This was in, I'll tell you, 2007 all the way to 2009.
Oh,
It's
that
very
was-
recent.
I
That
started
recent.
applying for radiation oncology in
That
2007.
recent. Okay.
And in 2007, they never had a black female in KwaZulu-Natal.
Was it that you were female, basically?
They never had a black doctor at all in radiation oncology, I must specify.
Okay. All right.
There were other black doctors in OBGYN, in pediatrics, but not in radiation oncology
What's
in my
so-
state,
what's so
because
different about
the
it?
professor still was stuck in his old ways.
What's so special about your profession, the cancer treatment?
Because my profession has a lot of money to start with,
Okay.
you get paid quite good if
Okay.
you're an oncologist.
Well, that's the reason to keep you out.
It can be, it can be one of them, but also there's a lot of research that takes place.
Okay.
There's also a lot of growth because the machines are changing all the time.
Okay.
They're upgrading all the time. And also there's a high scarcity amongst the African and African Americans, which is what I found out even here in Colombia. They don't have a lot of African Americans. I've been to Montefiore Hospital. They don't have enough African Americans. I met one lady in Montefiore who was only a junior, which was the case in my case too. So this field has been very difficult for African American and Africans to penetrate, basically, and to get the knowledge. And the question is why? That's exactly the question I asked the professor. Because the majority, it shows now that black and people of minority, not just only black, Spanish, every other people who are minorities are now developing cancer at a very high rate. Even Nelson Mandela was a cancer patient. Prostate cancer. So if people like that, to just explain this, cancer is now no longer about where you come from, your skin color, because we eat more or less the same food. We are more modernized than before. So our modernization brings the illness and form uniformity amongst the illnesses and amongst race groups, amongst cultures. It brings us together. Because where I come from in South Africa, it was well known that Africans, which is what the criteria that I belong under, the group, which I'm an African, black, never presented with cancer in the hospitals. But the question is,
what are you saying?
In the past, doctors never saw enough Africans in their hospitals with cancer. And there has been literature telling us that cancer is not common amongst African
people.
or people of African origin or minorities.
Was it the diet?
The reason being, now, my analysis, and I'm going to say what the literature has been saying, and I'm going to say what my analysis is. My analysis, having worked with African communities who are poor, they cannot afford to go to doctors.
Right.
Right. So
They do not have a bus fare to take a bus and go to the doctors. This is my experience,
Right.
which has to be written.
Right.
The media has written a lot about it, but a lot of must be in journal articles. Because they are poor, they get grants money from the government. They don't have a medical aid.
Okay.
Their belief structure, where I come from, is on traditional healers.
Right.
Not
of course.
on
Right.
medical Western,
Right.
westernized. They're not westernized.
Chemotherapy.
This is my village. I come from a poor village of South Africa called Guanyuswa. In this village, my mother is not educated. My mother cannot speak English. My mother is not, my church members, my village people. I'm the only doctor in the village.
Okay.
And now think about the village like that, where you have to go and explain now, ma'am, the thing that's growing in your breast is called breast cancer. She would tell you, no, it's a spell. Because it's a spell,
okay.
right? That's a
Okay.
myth.
They prey on it.
Right. I need to pray and cast the demons out, or I need to go to the traditional healer. You remember what I said? There's Christianity and there's cultural beliefs.
Right.
Some believe in both, some believe in one or the other. Those who believe in 100% cultural basis,
Right.
which you can see Nelson Mandela wearing his outfits, that's a culture. He belongs in the Xhosa culture. I belong in the Zulu culture, where Shaka Zulu originated.
okay.
I'm the strong warrior
All
girl.
right. Zulu.
I am the Shaka Zulu generation. You can see I'm tall.
Yeah.
But that plays a major role in illnesses.
Uh-huh.
But also remember that Africans, like we saw with the history, they were not allowed in towns. They needed a pass. How are you going to see them consulting a doctor? You never had a black doctor before.
Right.
So how are they going to be able to be accepted and treated by doctors of other races? So they were not treated
Okay.
the
You know,
same way or the same hospitals they were treated. So that created the research that told us cancer is not common amongst the people of minorities or Africans. But also literature has issues with food and that we plant our food, we don't buy from the shops
That's
because
right.
we don't have,
That's
we
the diet.
plow, we get water from the river, so we have more diarrhea instead of having, we are more sexually prone, we don't use preventative measures, we were more prone in HIV. That's the literature. More prone to HIV. In a way that in South Africa, where I come from, if a young black is losing weight, people think you have HIV, even if they have cancer. I will pause right there.
Wow.
Isn't
All right, you know what we're going to do? I'm going to give you a little profile on Dr. T, about her early beginnings, and some of you about her humble beginnings. All right, run Dr. T.
Good morning. Today, The Power Within is coming to you from the beautiful Groot Constantia estate. I'm Willie G, and after 2 weeks of cricket, it's great to be back on your screens, especially since we're in time to observe 16 days of activism against gender violence. On today's show, Dr. Thandeka MAZIBUKO tells us why she will always be a rural girl at heart. We find out more about the practice of osteopathy, then we're celebrating our best lives at O Magazine's exclusive annual tea party. Born to a domestic worker in rural KwaZulu-Natal, Thandeka MAZIBUKO lost her father at an early age. She was sent to live with relatives who forced her to quit matric and get married at just 17.
It begins in the dusty roads of Kwanyuswa when we grew up with my mom and a big family with my great-grandparents. She used to read a verse in the Bible that says, having bad people around you can deviate you from the good behavior that you might have learned in your life. That was a verse that really anchored our family. My mom was a domestic worker, raising us up as a single parent. I always go back and say, I'm grateful for my mother for teaching me religion, because I think it's the most important basis of every child's life. Whatever religion it is, it forms the basis of belief, and belief is everything in life. People give up because they lack that belief that it can be done, it is possible.
That's what I found most interesting in this first introduction. I mean, that's worldwide. If you don't believe in yourself and you have no self-esteem, you fall by the wayside. And a belief in God is always a secure place to be. So this is what got you through it, really, right?
I want to thank my mother. When I see that video, I feel tears in my eyes because it feels like, I always say this, when I was nominated for South African of the Year in 2015, I couldn't believe out of 55 million people, I am in the top 10. And I am the doctor with the president's wife, who is the chair of the AU, competing for the same award.
Wow.
And when I was standing there and I said, it feels like I just survived from a burning house. And I cannot keep still until I go back and rescue everybody who is left behind.
Okay.
My mother is the anchor of my life. We had challenges. We grew up very poor. We were eating rotten bread. We didn't have food. We didn't have money to go to school, but she believed that God is a provider. She taught us, me and my sister, because we're only two at home. My sister is 11 months apart. We are 11 months apart. She taught us that nothing is impossible with God.
Amen.
She also said, you can do all things through Christ who strengthens you. And she said, any good behavior can be destroyed by hanging out with the wrong crowd. Those are the words that anchored my life.
Yeah.
My mom prayed, taught us how to pray, but my grandmother used to rotate our house and pray every single night at 12 midnight ever since I was a baby.
Oh, really?
I don't remember my grandmother sleeping at 12 midnight. She would pray, circle the house, pray for us, lay hands on each and every one of us, release God's blessing, and then go back to sleep. She died of diabetes when I was in medical school, 3rd year. This is when I started the charity organization called Sinomusa Nothando, which means, it's a Zulu word, which means we have love, care, and generosity. Because my grandmother died, if you see those valleys in the video, no car can get into my house. We have to walk. When she was sick, the ambulance said, I'm sorry, we cannot help your grandmother. We cannot go and pick her up. So she died in my arms. And I said, I will make sure that I do the best I can to provide preventative measures for our people, African origin, especially previously disadvantaged by apartheid, that we don't die because we don't know. We lack knowledge about diseases like cancer, hypertension, diabetes, and we don't die because we don't have access to health care. This is why the organization I founded was for decentralization of healthcare knowledge and resources from the rich to the poor, from the educated to the non-educated. So God anchored my life.
Yes.
When I look back and I'm saying, why am I in New York City today? How can I afford to be here? It is God who's been leading me throughout.
Okay, all right.
So looking at the situation currently in this country with what's going on in Obamacare and what the Republicans, what are you thinking about these measures that they're seeking to take here and thinking also about home and what you have set up to help the people back in South Africa?
I'm just thinking Obama did the best that
That's
he
right.
could.
There you go.
That's
There you
where
go.
it begins.
There you go.
I think the honorable leader, Martin Luther King, did the best
Amen.
they could
There you
do.
go. That's right.
I think the community of the African American community has done what they can. And I'm comparing where we come from with health care, things falling apart in South Africa too. We're not the greatest. But we started a structure called Business Economic Empowerment. Business Economic Empowerment said if you build a hospital, you have to have a black person as a shareholder. It forced the companies to be inclusive. So looking at the healthcare, and I know the vote was taken just this week, and the vote for debating the Obamacare, and knowing that millions of people will be without health care, I see devastation coming. And I know exactly where you're going because that's where we are. I am talking about someone dying in your hands as a doctor because they cannot afford, yet you have an ethical code that forces you to treat the person, but treat them with nothing. You treat them with the minimal that's available, not the best that they can afford, or not the best that the system has available. So where we then start categorizing a person according to the value of money than the value of life.
Right.
Moving away from the God creation where he says we are all equals. We are all equal in his eyes. Where people now are monetary value. Their lives are gambled with.
Right.
Because I think every president has a responsibility to provide free health care. I have been involved in fighting for health care for my people previously disadvantaged in South Africa. I was part of the team that started negotiations with our government. I'm speaking to the doctors now in the United States. I'm saying, doctors, you have a voice and you can use that voice. You have to be part of the political system. You cannot sit in your rooms, make money, and forget that people are dying out there and they need your help. One doctor can make a statement that can shake the house. 2 doctors can shake the world. If 3, 4 unite, and 5, 6, and the whole country write a letter and request to be part of the platform of decision making, I know doctors are doing that, but it has to be done in a uniform manner where doctors unite together and contest against such actions, where actions will then will make healthcare a burden to the doctor, because the doctor is at the end of the day is the one who faces the patient who is poor, who cannot afford.
That's right.
And usually it's the young doctors who get to manage the patients who are poor. How unfair it is for the interns, for the young residents who are still learning to learn with minimal resources. I've been through the system and I know how painful it is when you see a cancer patient, you know they could have received radical treatment, but you give them palliation because there's there's a 2-year waiting period. So in that 2 years of them waiting, I know exactly what's happening in their body. I've seen patients with worms. This is what you're gonna come to see. Where worms develop from cancer, because cancer make your body rot. So people were starting to rot with their bodies. So all I'm saying is we've represented the doctors and we make the system stop. We said we want to start the negotiations where you build the hospitals, where you improve our healthcare system. And the system did stop, the salaries increased, the healthcare was started improving, and we started seeing hospitals being renovated. We had equipment in the hospitals. Why? Because doctors said, we cannot work in a system like that. Right. And the doctor's voice is the only powerful voice I think can rescue a lot of patients.
How can you prevent getting cancer? What is the root cause of cancer? I always thought it was stress.
There are so many causes of cancer. Thank you for asking that question. Smoking is one of them. I would say there are things that we put in our bodies that makes us be predisposed to cancer. There are things that are generational that makes us be predisposed to cancer. But there are also things that the system around us, like the sunlight. Environment, yes. Like overexposure to the sunlight can cause you to have melanoma. Yes. Cancers
but
like...
if you have a certain amount of pigmentation, you can
even though overexposure, some people are overexposed into the sunlight for too long, they don't wear the hats, they don't protect themselves.
Black people can't catch skin cancer.
They can. I have patients who have melanoma.
Dark-skinned people can catch
dark-skinned people.
skin?
I'm dark-skinned. I come from the dark-skinned country.
Yeah, that's what I mean.
Yes.
I think part of that is
possible.
the ozone layer, which has been greatly depleted over the last 50, 70 years. And I had the same notion, black people, we don't have to worry about that. But the ozone layer has been thinned out because of pollution. And even in New Zealand, where they grow more sheep than any other area of the world, the methane gas from the sheep has eroded. There is a hole in the atmosphere over New Zealand because of there is something like, I forgot how many sheep there are to people, but the people are the minority in New Zealand. And they have to wear protective clothing because the ozone layer, which would shield you from some of that sun and the radiation, the ozone layer is not there. So it is, the environment is playing a piece.
Like when we talk about the external factors, also you mentioned radiation, patients who also are getting radiation treatment, there's a long-term side effect of developing another cancer in your body because of radiation. So some, like I'm saying, environmental factors, also treatment can predispose patients to cancer.
Treatment?
Yeah, like when you get radiation treatment. Radiation.
And people are smoking. My favorite cure for cancer is cannabis, right? I know a lot. I had to talk to somebody. She had breast cancer. I pointed her out to you at NAN. And I had to convince her for the side effects of radiation, she smoked some reefer to get rid of the symptoms, to get the nausea and the rest of it, get an appetite. So there's something that's been going on for years.
There are some, there's a cigarette smoking. And there's a leaf smoking. Cannabis falls under not the cigarette, because it's not a cigarette. Cigarette has nicotine.
And other chemicals.
Tars. Those chemicals are the ones that have been identified to be the predisposing factor for developing cancer. They come into the body, they cause a process called metaplasia. Metaplasia is when a chemical comes. Viruses too do the same thing. Metaplasia is when a normal cell, say they had a maybe squamous where the cells are flat, they then change the structure into being cuboidal, which means longer. So instead of your maybe esophagus having a flat surface, it becomes longer. That's metaplasia. It's a change of a structure from one epithelial lining to another epithelial lining that is not meant for that structure. So when metaplasia takes place and you continue exposing the same metaplastic epithelium into the exposure, then you develop cancer. I'll make an example. Young girls now there's a vaccine for HPV.
HPV, yes. Bad news.
Ah, that's
Metaplasia
That's
also
new.
takes place.
Papillomavirus.
Yes.
Papillomavirus.
That's
Yes.
new. This is
no,
new.
it's not. The virus, the vaccine is new,
Yeah.
but the virus is old. The virus is the main cause for women developing cervical cancer, but also oral cancer is caused by HPV too. So that's why oral sex has some kind of predisposition. It's being found to have a predisposition to certain kinds of cancers and oral cancers. But there's so many other causes of cancer that we can go into. HIV is one of them. It predisposes patients to developing cancer. It's not the direct cause, but it's like a fermenter or like it incubates.
It's a catalyst.
Yes, it becomes like kind of an incubator for the cancer to grow faster than it would.
What about stress?
Stress has been also, it's going to be it's going to fall under environmental issues because stress is more environmental, say, the environment is changing, the economical status is changing, that people have got issues, then it predisposes to also developing, it's been studied, stress causes heart problems, causes obesity, people eat a lot. It predisposes to a lot of cancer. There's so many causes of cancer, but I also want us to talk about the hereditary because that's very important. Some cancers run in the family.
Really?
Angelina Jolie removed the breast and the ovaries because she could check and do a genetic testing and check and find that her mother had cancer, then there's a strong cancer history in her family on first-degree relatives. So if you have a strong first-degree relative, a strong history of cancer on the first-degree relative, you are most likely to be predisposed in getting cancer. So genetic studies are very important to go and find out who in your family or in your generation may develop this kind of a cancer. They can do an outline and assess and find out how much risk you have of developing cancer. If you're first-degree relative, I'll make an example. It's your mom, your dad, your sister. Not your husband.
Okay.
Because people think I'm married to him. He's not your first-degree relative. Your husband, your children, then may be predisposed in that way. So some are hereditary, some are genetically following in the families, like breast cancer, colon cancer. They follow in the trend of the family.
Prostate too?
Prostate, no. Prostate is more about the age. It's more about the cells dying because of the age, like cervical cancer. Cervical cancer tends to occur amongst elderly, before it used to occur amongst elderly women, before we had HIV. We will not find an 18-year-old with cervical cancer because the cells will start changing, like I was explaining, at the age of 40. That's when the guidelines said we must start screening for cervical cancer at the age of 35. Same thing with prostate. Older men, I'm happy you mentioned that because younger men tend to develop testicular cancer. But older
What
men,
kind of cancer?
testicular.
Testicle.
The testicle.
Okay. That's
It's
what I
called
thought you were saying.
testicular cancer. So younger men. Older men tend to have prostate
From too much
cancer.
sex? Or what would cause
No,
that?
testicular cancer tends to occur amongst the young. They are more predisposed. They have to palpate and feel their testicles exactly like women feel their breast.
Really?
Yes. And it's usually common amongst young boys who had undescended testes at the young age of 5. If your child was told they have an undescended testis, you understand what an undescended testis is?
The gonads drop
The
into
gonads
the
do
scrotum.
not drop into the scrotum at the age of 3. Before the age of 5, they have to have dropped into the scrotum because God created them to stay on top when the child is born in the abdominal area.
Okay.
But when you grow, then they start dropping slowly. But there's something called gubernaculum in embryology that houses it. Sometimes it does not drop. So it stays in the abdomen. Why is it bad if it stays in the stomach area? Because the temperature in the abdominal area is high than the testicles. So the testicles are the containers that it's like an AC of the man's body.
Right, for the sperm.
For the scrotum, for the growth of the sperm, and for the fertilization process.
Okay.
So if your child, like my son, had the same thing, he did not
really?
drop,
Okay.
yes. So he has to keep on monitoring himself. And the doctor said, no, it's right there. I said, I know. I remember my embryology lecture in second year medical school. I know Professor Mikkel was teaching me, and he said, if you palpate and you don't feel the testicles by the age of 3, the child, you must start sending them to the doctors. This is very important for the mothers who have the boys. Feel the testicles of your boys when they're born, and feel if they're filled or they're empty, and follow them through until the age of 5. If the sac remains empty, that child may develop cancer of the testicles when they're older. So things that happen at a young age come back when you're older. If you drink alcohol at a young age, when you're older, you're going to develop liver cancer. You're going to have many other problems. If you start smoking at a young age, you'll have lung cancer, you have breast cancer, you have all kinds of cancers. So whatever we put in our body, or whatever circumstances or environment or genetic predisposition or challenges, health challenges, have an impact when we're older. Hence, that's why men develop prostate cancer when they're older rather than when they're younger, because it has been found that it's a disease of the that occurs when there's a change in the structure of the cells. And then you develop the prostate cancer at an the older age rather than the younger age. So what's important, I apologize to interrupt. Well, I want to say this. What's important for men is to do a prostatic specific antigen, which is called PSA. PSA, you pull the blood. The doctor takes the blood and check it. But also what's important is a digital rectal examination. What do I mean?
Finger.
You allow the doctor to go to the rectal area and insert the finger to feel for I'll say swelling or enlargement of the prostate, because that's where it begins. It begins with the finger first. Then if there's suspicions, then the doctor will pull up the blood. But if you are of an age above 35, you have to go and
35?
Yes, you have to go and do PSA. If you have not done it by if you have not done it by age 40, you already have to go and do a really urgent booking and see your doctor for the finger and examination, which is the rectal digital examination, as well as the PSA. There's a lot of research about PSA, whether it's 100% sure or it's not. There are so many things that even digital rectal examination can maybe sometimes cause a slight raise. There's a lot of, but that's academic conversation. That's a conversation we have in our meetings on literature to improve the detection rate. But it's not for a patient to say, oh, there's arguments amongst clinicians, so I'm not going to follow. My advice is save your life, prevention. This is why we started Sinomusa Notando to provide this test for free.
At my church, I had a rectal examination. They told me that I better come back for another examination. I got scared and went home and took Golden Seal.
Well, that's the holistic.
Yes.
Yeah, I've had
Don't
the,
worry,
I've
I'm
had
here.
the exams.
I'm here. We'll take
I've
care
had the
of it.
exams.
We've had one.
I understand a couple of things that alkalinity affects cancerous growth. More alkaline the body is, the more restricted the cancer can become, and also that with radiation on therapy, the rads given to black people, and I got this from a radiologist, and because all medicine is not universal. She said that A black person with a darker melanization cannot take the same rads of a person with a lighter melanization. Not true? True.
That's not true.
Not true? All right,
I'm
well,
a
that's
doctor.
why I'm asking.
I'm a doctor who prescribes radiation, and we have guidelines that guide us on how to treat, and the treatment dose is the same. I will tell you where the difference is with cancer. Cancer, you and I can have the same cancer. Because you know that men can get breast cancer.
Yeah.
You know
I have
that.
a friend that has.
we
So
had a guy on the show.
let's just say both of us has breast cancer. But the stage is not the same.
Okay.
The tissue diagnosis cannot be the same, which is histology. Histology tells you whether you have lymph nodes, how many lymph nodes are involved.
Right.
Lymph nodes are the glands that drains
Right.
the
The
dirt
immune
from your
system.
body,
Right.
the immune system. When it's dirt,
Right.
after fighting, it gets released into the glands.
Okay.
So how many glands are involved?
Right.
And there's something we call lymphovascular invasion. Has there been signs that there's an invasion into the lymph system or into the vascular system?
Okay.
Those are things that patients don't know because we as doctors don't explain these things. And people say, oh, I'm getting this dose and you're getting this dose. So it's not, no patient has the same dose in oncology. Okay. None. You cannot treat the same breast cancer the same way because cancer doses are different, determined by your histology, also determined by your health. You can have the good histology, be ready to take treatment, but if your health, you are weak, you cannot stand up, you cannot sit down, you cannot get out of the bed, it changes your treatment. So it's your body, your environment, your type of cancer, your size of the cancer, your spread of the cancer. There's so many issues that are involved in determining what treatment.
How about your state of mind?
State of mind has no impact. The only impact on the state of mind is when a patient cannot sign the consent.
How
Then
about your power, your will to live, your will to continue?
if you cannot sign the consent, then you cannot give the treatment. That's the only way because if you say state of mind, you include depression, anxiety, state of mind. It affects the state of mind.
Cancer? I mean, if you're depressed.
No, we talk about treatment right now.
Okay.
So state of mind does not affect the treatment unless you cannot sign the consent, because you have to consent as a patient to get radiation and chemo. Nobody forces you. You get asked if you want, you get canceled, you sign, and then you come back on another date for a planning. Then you come back on another, planning means we draw where you're going to be treated, where the rays will hit, because you cannot just treat anywhere. Remember, we also have to go to the computer and allow the organs are called critical structures. We cannot expose critical structures to radiation. The issue with radiation is tolerance and effectiveness. How can your tissues tolerate chemo or radiation, and how can we get the best benefit outcome? That's where we stuck with radiation or chemotherapy, is to say we know our treatment has an effect, but how much of a dose can we give that is safe for the tissues, but also not too kind to the cancer? So how can we preserve the normal organs? Say we're treating the uterus. How can I then make sure the bladder is out of the way? We make sure that we infuse with the catheter to lift the blood. We do a lot of things to try and make sure that normal organs are not exposed. That's where we are stuck. Otherwise, if we could give as much dose, we would have a cure for cancer. Because radiation is effective. But now, also I want to explain, the cancer cells are not the same as, some cells are the same as cancer cells in our body, like the nails, like the hair cells, hair follicles, like the gut system, like the bone marrow. Those cells are fast growing. The cancer cells are also fast growing. So when you get the treatment of radiation or chemo doesn't know which one is a cancer cell.
It kills both.
All it knows is I'm going in there to target anything that is fast growing. So chemo and radiation goes and kill everything that is fast growing because the target
That's why
is
the hair-
cancer.
So that's why people lose
the
their hair,
falls.
the nails turn color.
The nails
Really
turns and become black and frizzle out. And that's why they have nausea and vomiting and diarrhea, because the gut is fast growing. That's why they will say, my count is low. I cannot get chemo this week because my count is low. Blood hemoglobin goes down. Platelets can get affected. These are the counts that are very important. So we have to check every time before we give chemotherapy or radiation. We have to check the bloods and check the counts. If your counts are low, which we find a lot in South Africa from HIV, patients' counts are low, they cannot get chemo and radiation. So answer your question, do we give it to everybody?
Well,
It
let me
depends on
run
your
this cancer cure real quick before we run out of time. We only have 8 minutes left. But run the pot smokers.
The cannabis.
The cannabis.
It's the favorite
All
in
right.
Harlem community.
Well, this is about
not
head
even-
traumas. This is about head traumas.
They're not
and
even smoking
PTSD.
cannabis. What they're smoking is not cannabis.
I mean,
About this new system quite yet. There's still many organizations out there that think that cannabis and its derived compounds may have medical benefit.
The primary discussion we're having with the Patients At a Time is having right now is with the National Hockey League to consider cannabis as a medicine for head injury for their injured players. NHL has had the unfortunate circumstance of having at least 3 of their players in the last 18 months, former players, head injured, former players, commit suicide. Cannabis is one of the few compounds that will pass through the blood-brain barrier. Therefore, that anti-inflammatory therapeutic value of cannabis can go right to the brain, and of course it would be immediately helpful if it was given right on the spot of the injury.
Besides the members of the NHL, another country that has already been testing this theory of cannabis aiding with brain trauma is Israel.
Initial science from Israel, again, who is a leader in this field, indicates that they have successfully treated soldiers on the battlefield with cannabis. From the doctor that made the report to us, it was administered on the battlefield in an oral mucosal spray. In other words, a soldier, an Israeli soldier, male or female, is head injured on the battlefield. Their medic administers cannabis on the field before they even go to a mass unit. And they have found that this anti-inflammatory capacity of cannabis has greatly reduced the degree of the TBI.
From on the battlefield to off, the Patients Out of Time group also believe that there would be great benefit to administering cannabis products right here in the U.S. to veterans struggling with PTSD.
And one of the things that really gets me when we talk about patients and the use of cannabis and its medical value or not is when we put cannabis together in the same sentence with the United States military veteran. I'm a military veteran, and my wife is a military veteran. And what we have in the United States now are military veterans, injured, wounded people, physically and mentally, who are not allowed therapeutic cannabis because of where they live. Veterans are killing themselves by suicide every 80 minutes. And a lot of that is based upon depression from post-traumatic stress and TBI injuries that is exacerbated by the use of alcohol.
Aside from taking cannabis as a medicine to treat or heal a disease, there are many theories out there that suggest that due to our body's endocannabinoid system being involved in many different functions of the body, the use of cannabis might be a good preventative medicine also.
all right, an eye-opener.
A great idea.
PTSD? I've been recording stuff like this for the last 10 years. I've been talking about this for a long time. But recently on 669, a Republican station, they've like introduced, they go hours and hours of these training programs on how to use hemp oil. And they've indoctrinated, when you see how they're legalizing it throughout the United States, so all the rich people are going to be in control of growing cannabis in this country.
On the stock market,
All right?
too.
It is sad that a black child found cannabis and they were
Well,
used
see,
to
we can
get
start
locked
now.
up.
We
They
can
used to
start
get
now.
locked up before.
Yeah.
Well,
for
now with the
cannabis.
opioid.
Now it's allowed.
Yeah,
But I just want to say this on a medical perspective as a medical doctor to patients out there who are patients of cancer or brain injuries, do whatever you do with your doctor. Because if you're going to go to the streets and get the cannabis oil
Yeah, well,
or
that's
cannabis, you
where you
never
can't
know.
go.
There are
That's right.
people who have been playing our patients. I've had
Yeah.
patients saying, sorry, doctor, I'm not going to take your medication. I'm going to take the oil. And they have died. I have
Okay.
not really
All
had a
right.
patient with me who
Okay.
left our center and said, I will take oil, and who is still living at the moment.
Okay.
Because there's so many mixtures out there. We're in a world where there's no control, there's confusion.
Right.
Don't be part of the confusion, but be part of the solution.
Okay.
Sometimes solution takes long to come, but it's coming because there are people, men and women, who spend their times in laboratories. I know Dr. Goha in Montefiore. I've rotated with him. He's doing amazing work. Maybe we can have him on the show one
Okay.
day to talk about the work they're doing on research, looking at the enzyme level, looking at all sorts of DNA extrapolation to understand the cancer cells and be able to block it.
Right,
So there's
right,
amazing research that's going on, even with cannabis and cannabis oil. Don't get us wrong, we are not against cannabis use, but all we're saying is wait,
Do it
let
right.
it be studied. Let there be studies, because the current studies say cannabis has been used in a very amazing way for centuries
5,000
for
years.
vomiting,
That's right.
nausea.
That's right.
I wonder why we never started testing the cure aspect.
That's right.
Maybe because it was illegal. That's
That's
why
right.
everybody who had cannabis at that time would be locked up. But we don't know why our forefathers who were professors never investigated the cure. They investigated the alleviation of symptoms only, like nausea, vomiting. It's an amazing pain controller.
Also, most of what our people are ingesting now that they call reefer is not reefer. It's not marijuana.
Right.
They are not smoking it. We had vacant lots in Brooklyn growing in the 50s that were all marijuana.
Even in Guanyusa.
That stuff
30
they're
seconds.
smoking is not marijuana. It's a
Right.
chemical concoction of a number of things, and you need to keep that out of your
Do you
system.
know what
We're
they
out
use
of
in South
time.
Africa?
We're
They
out of
use
time.
a red killer.
Ah. Stay tuned for more. And we're going to get all pot smokers join. Team up and get the good stuff.
67 minutes.
Power to the people. God bless. The God in me loves the God in you. Stay tuned for more of the Gilchrist Experience next week. Boom. Power to the people.
We're off. I was in Panama.